allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, changes to the agenda? If not, a motion would be in order to approve. Eric, would like to make the motion to approve.
I'll move it.
Motion.
And Jim seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Oh, Lynette's here too. We don't have any public with us today, so we'll go right into the consent agenda. Minutes of June 24th. Everyone should have received those. A motion to approve.
Kristen Ross, I'll move to approve the agenda. I mean, sorry,
Minutes.
Second.
minutes, yes, the approved minutes.
Jim Mumford seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, passes unanimously. Approval of the warrants. Everyone receives the warrants in their email. So a motion to approve the warrants would be in order.
Make the motion.
Jim makes the motion, second. Eric seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Superintendent's report?
Do you want to hold off on?
Sure, but most everyone's heard the superintendent's report, so we're just gonna hold Chris's till we get down to school reopening. So we'll move to Lisa for assistant superintendent report.
I believe you all have my report in your packet. I don't think I have any updates since then, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
So the only thing, I think you received the email from Matt today, Lisa also, is when we look at the August meeting, if we can come with some kind of grading ideas so we can start to really have a path forward this year. It seems like we've been on this path for a really long time, and it's time for us all to come to some semblance of what we're going to do, letters, numbers, whatever that is. If we need to have a scale showing how that works, but we need to, I guess for lack of a better phrase, stop talking about it and just do it. So if that could be, come to the August meeting, so people can have an idea of the options. I know Matt had sent some in the packet, so other people could have that. So
Yeah, you'd ask me to bring the samples
Yeah.
from the different places to look at.
Okay.
Certainly do.
Does anyone have any questions for Lisa?
I just want to clarify, Lisa, this is Kristen Ross. Just wanted to clarify, Lisa, what kind of deliverable in terms of report that you were thinking of? So do you want like a presentation that we sort of talk about and form an action plan? Do you want an action plan proposed already with who's going to do what and when, or how are you kind of, I feel like if we kind of give a little more guided structure of how Lisa and others who are working on this can put something together, that might help them in a short amount of time, but because our, the month moves fast with a lot of this other stuff going on.
Sure, and I think we spoke about this at the prior meeting as well, that we need to have a plan brought to us that shows options. And the board needs to decide the direction we're going to be going for grading in the SU. Otherwise, I am of the impression that districts are going to start to do this independently. And I think it would be better if we make that decision as an SU, because we see students move quite often across our SU. And I think it will be easier for them, for records, for students, for teachers whose classes are coming into, and parents, that if we're all on the same grading skill set across the SU. Otherwise, I think in August or September, you're going to see individual districts within the SU say, we waited, it hasn't happened, this is what we're going to do.
So
I'm with
Lisa,
you.
do you have a good sense of what you'll be able to bring to us for August?
Well, I mean, our committee's been working really hard. We've been focused on the high school level and the transcript work, trying to get everybody on the same page with habits of work, developing a conversion scale so that we can provide GPAs for all students. So that's really the focus of our work right now. We are working on an informational page to be able to go home with jump rope for all students using it, that gives parents more information about what a jump rope grade means and how to interpret the scores. But that's as far as we've gone in that work. Obviously for us right now, reopening planning is just a big part of our time. So we've been chipping away at these things. The team is meeting almost weekly on top of all the other meetings and commitments that they've got to try to make forward progress. Where we feel like we're making some big steps forward, but we haven't even started talking about district-wide grading systems yet.
Okay, I'm just, we've had a couple of reports and some critiques already, and so I just want to make sure that you and your crew are clear for the next time around, so that you're not hearing the same complaints from us next time, I guess.
Thanks, Kristen.
All right, is there anything else?
Lisa, this is Clarence. There's a whole lot of static and feedback. I can hardly understand any of the things that are being said online. I don't know what's going on. Is anyone else having the same problem understanding?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of
Yes.
feedback.
If everyone mutes
I don't know
themselves,
what the problem is, but something is.
the more people that have open mics, the more feedback you're going to receive. So,
*6, right?
Yes.
*6, mute you or unmute you.
Correct. Lisa,
Yeah,
this is
so-
Lynette.
yeah,
I'm sorry. Lisa, I'm just looking at what Matt was talking to you about. I did speak with him again. Of course, Rutland Town has been trying to do this for years and have been stymied. So before we would prefer to do it supervisory union-wide, but before we're forced into just doing something ourselves.
understood. I think Quarry Valley is actually in the same position. That if a decision is not made at the SU level, Quarry Valley will be creating their own grading set and their own transcript moving forward. Since we are the only district that has high schools, the transcripts really just deal with us. I'm not sure what the transcript looks like for Rutland Town as an 8th grader moving on to high school if they leave with a transcript, but it's certainly not to the degree that the high schools are. So I understand that we've been dealing with COVID, and I understand there's a lot of work going on reopening, but I also understand that we've been dealing with this, talking about this at multiple meetings, and something has to come forward for us to look at, and decisions are going to be made, or it's going to be made at a district level. And I actually think that would be a disadvantage to us as an SU, because then that just makes us more independent rather than having that unification piece across the supervisory union. So,
I agree wholeheartedly that it would be advantageous for so many reasons to have it be a supervisory union-wide decision. You know, there are professional development and training implications, there are support implications, platform implications. There are so many reasons why it would be much better for us to be able to do that. And if we can bring forward a plan that the board supports, I think that would be fabulous.
But am I misunderstanding something? I feel like this was effective at the elementary school level. And I don't know what Rutland Town's issues are entirely, but Middletown Springs has been using this for a while, and I believe Wells is. So, and it's very helpful with students and teachers.
The current one we're using now is helpful for you?
We've been using it for a lot of years. We were using it long before. I wish somebody, Clarence, how long have we been using it?
I think what Meredith's referring to is the standards-based report cards, which are proficiency-based report cards. There's a slightly different formatting that has been used in Wells and Middletown and Bolton Elementary. Standards-based for a number of years.
So but that's what the elementary schools use, and that's just, like I said, it's more effective, I think, in guiding learning for a variety of students.
I think what we're talking about is the actual mark on the grade card, having that be universal. There are, and I don't know what you use at Wells or Middletown, but there was a time that people were using letters, some were using numbers. There was not a consistency even across districts, and there, even within Quarry Valley, there's not a consistency across the district for even high schools. We still have a high school on a 100-point grading scale. So what we're looking at is that everyone is marking the same. Everyone's either using whole numbers, they're using, for example, my child will graduate this year. She has old ABC on her grade card. She has whole, or on her transcript, whole numbers, numbers to the decimal, and she has EPMPs on her transcript. That's not acceptable. That needs to be cleaned up. So with students going forward, we're using one grading marking system across. If it's not going to be across the SU, then it's certainly going to be across individual districts. And that's
I guess what I'm trying to say is that's fine for high school, but I don't think it's the same thing for elementary. Boy, the sound is really bad. I don't know if we can mute some more people, but it's really hard to hear.
Lisa, we can hear you all fine.
You guys sound very clear.
Yeah, we're getting a ton of feedback here.
Yeah, so what it
Yeah,
is
that's remote feedback.
there's two phone numbers that end in 72, and one of them is muted and the other one is not. And then when one of us talks, is there any way to mute the GRCSU conference room phone? Because that is also the issue. Like if we're all muted when you guys talk, Lisa, where you are, we can hear you, but as soon as somebody else who's not in the conference room talks, the feedback comes from you guys because you're still live, you're not muted. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just means someone has to set up a laptop the whole time.
I can do that. That's fine.
All right, we will assign, Lisa Madison has agreed to be our mute person, so she's living the dream. She gets to mute us whenever she wants.
Is that what you're saying?
You've given her sole power here.
I'm pretty trustworthy, I swear.
Hopefully that helps a little bit, but there's still somebody on who's the two phone numbers that end in 72. So that's either the same person twice or coincidentally two people are 72. And so One of
No,
them
one's
is
7.2 and one's 4.2.
I think that sometimes when somebody signs off, it doesn't always, we decided here, it doesn't always drop them off. They're only live on one.
The 4-2 is going to be me. I keep popping in and out because I was trying to answer Meredith. Meredith, at Rutland Town, our 8th graders going into high school, it does make a big difference because there's sometimes a limited amount of students that can go into higher AP classes. If they do not clearly understand where our student is, they may or may not get the classes that they should. And secondly, we still have a very large parent base that cannot understand the current system. While we love the system itself, we're just saying on grading on the report cards or the end of the year, we want the parents to get the, say, 4.0 equals either on the 100 scale or on the number scale. And we want to do that consistently throughout the school.
Yeah, I'm well aware of the issues. And by the way, the sound is great now.
It's just a coincidence. Those that are green, all you have to do, if you're calling in, it's *6 to mute yourself. You should probably use it like a walkie-talkie. And you know, when you typically are saying over, you just hit the mute, you know, like that after you're done, and that just keeps all the feedback from hitting whatever.
If you're talking in the conference room, somebody needs to turn you back on because it's dead silence out here for the rest of us at the moment.
Yeah, the conference room was muted.
Try again. Yeah.
We moved on to contract recommendations, and we've just given Chris a raise of $100,000.
Which we turn back to her. Donating back to the district.
There's an addendum for Chris Sell, Superintendent, $40 per month for the cell phone stipend and annuity, 2% gross wages. Natalie Hood, summer school-based clinician, $30 an hour. Part of that is from the Aware Grant Funds. Margaret McDonald, Pulte Elementary, Title I, $76,980, moving from Corey Valley to Grcsu to being paid with grant funds. Are there any questions about those recommendations? If not, a motion would be in order to approve.
Motion.
Moved by Jim, second by Eric. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Support staff. Dr. Ciccarelli as the COVID-19 coordinator, $5,000 stipend from July till December 2020. Lori Smith, Rutland Town Para, $14.24 an hour. And Vincent Cavino, an addendum to his FY21 contract for the $40 per month cell phone stipend. Are there any questions about those recommendations?
Instead of climbing up into the 90s, we expect our temperatures to stay fairly low.
Didn't we, Didn't we approve the COVID coordinator position last month?
We approved, having Chris offer it to him.
Just to offer it?
Yeah, we didn't approve having like, offer it. We said Chris get hired based on, COVID-based needs, but so we can sign the contract. Is there a motion to approve the contract recommendations for support staff?
I make the motion.
I'll second Kristen Ross.
Moved by Jim, second by Kristen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. In your packet, you have just an update of vacancies within that issue. Is there anything you want to address about that, Chris? Or those, they are what they are?
They are what they are.
All right, Lewis.
Actually, I'm sorry. Dean of Students has been filled.
Oh, that's what we're talking about the other night.
Sorry.
Jesus, who's with the what with her? Okay, Lewis, you're up.
Okay. So I have two things for tonight. I have an update on state finances, and I have just an FYI. You should have received. Somebody's line's not muted. Whoever ends in 7-2, please mute. Okay. So a credit card procedure or a gift card, I'm sorry, gift card procedure. Did everybody receive that email?
Yes.
Okay. That's just an FYI. It's an update to the procedure. This was done or sent out as a request based on something that happened at a local board meeting. Does anybody have any questions on that procedure?
Lewis, this is Kristen. I just wanted to ask about number 8, where it says building level administration is responsible, etc. Do we want to be more specific of who that is, or is it better to leave it general? Just because of what was discussed previously, are we going to leave it to the building level administrator, as in the top level, or all administrators that might be responsible for touching paperwork related to gift cards? Just a question. I don't have a preference. I just wondered.
Administration. So what this is, in essence says is that the approval and the purchase of the gift cards is done by the business office. But once they are approved and purchased, then if it was for a school, it would be sent to the school level to manage the use of that gift card. And the building level administration would refer to the administrator of the building. It would fall under their supervision.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll move on.
Just one other question, sorry, about number 9 and the receipts. What if a gift card, I know these cases are really rare, but let's say a gift card for $50 was used for something and $20 was used, and it was maybe, you wouldn't see that receipt until the whole gift card is consumed or used up. So what if that $20 purchase happens in, November, but then the rest of the gift card isn't used till April? But meanwhile, that $20 purchase might have been something not great to be purchased. Do you know what I mean? So that you wouldn't see that receipt until the whole gift card is totally spent up, is what I interpret number 9 to mean. Is that your intent?
That is correct. So I think the use of gift cards and the purchase of them is going to be completely rare, and not almost to non-existent. There's only actually 2 scenarios where I can think of where gift card has been used in the past, and one is for app purchases, and that has gone down significantly. If you remember, about 5-7 years ago, iPads were the big rave, and everybody, all the special educators were using them for their students based on their IEPs. They were buying apps, and the easiest way to buy an app was to have an iTunes gift card. I think that has changed significantly over the last few years. iPads really have been used less and less in schools, and the need for those gift cards has dwindled, if it's existent at all. So that's the first scenario. So those are rarely used anymore. The second scenario that I've seen gift cards used for is for homeless students, and those are usually in the case of there's an emergency, a student is homeless, and somebody from the office someone from one of the schools needs to go out and purchase items for that student, or get a gift card to that student so that they can go purchase items. And in those cases, that's usually followed pretty closely by either the homeless liaison or the guidance counselor at the school. And those funds are used up pretty much right away. So I think based on those two scenarios and the fact that the purchase of gift cards should be completely rare going forward, that when gift cards are purchased, there'll be a tracking mechanisms to really track where those gift cards are and that they're being used and being followed.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so then moving on to the next topic, just an update on the state finances. So the information that I'm going to provide you today is a combination of information both from a discussion that happened today at the VSA conference, as well as information that we received from Brad James last week. So the first piece is on the different monies available to school districts. So in essence, they've broken the money out into a few different buckets, or I'm going to give it to you in a few different buckets. So the first one is really subject specific, I'm going to call it, just because it really pertains to certain parts of each school. So there is money that's been set aside out of the CARES money for food service. There's money that's been set aside for ventilation. And then there's all these, there's a few other small aspects of our schools that the money pertains to. That money is going to be available to schools based on an application process, and any money you receive out of those funds has no ed fund impact. So it will cover our expenses, and it will not reduce our education funding. The second set of funds that's available has two different buckets, I'll call them. It's the unbudgeted expenses and the budgeted expenses. So this is the CFR money. It stands for the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So for the unbudgeted expenses, it'll reimburse school districts for any expenses that they've incurred for items that have been unbudgeted, whether it be FY20 or FY21. So that'll cover items like PPE, cleaning supplies, Chromebooks for students for remote learning, machines to clean doorknobs or whatever, or plexiglass for students' desks, anything like that. If it's items that are due to COVID that have not been budgeted, it'll reimburse us for those expenses, and there's no education fund impact. So that means that money that we get will reimburse us at as long as there's enough money in that fund at 100%, and it will not reduce our education spending next year or this year. So the other piece of that is budgeted expenses. So what they're looking to do is reimburse districts for expenses that have been budgeted but pertain to remote learning or pertain to items that could be covered under COVID relief. And so if you get reimbursement for any of those funds, they will reduce our education spending dollar for dollar. And this is one of the mechanisms they're using to fill that hole that we have at the state level for missing revenue. So if you have the expense budgeted, you don't have an overspend, so they're going to still pay you. If you look for $100,000 in reimbursement, they'll give you that $100,000 reimbursement, but then they'll lower your FY21 education spending dollar for dollar. We are looking for guidance from the state. So some of the scenarios that were thrown out for this is we may say that, okay, 10% of all teacher salaries, because they were remote learning from April to June, and that covers 10% of teacher salaries, or maybe it's 15%. We can move, say, 15% of all teacher salaries to this CFR reimbursement. So if that equals $100,000, they would pay us the $100,000. That would create a surplus for us because we already had those expenses budgeted. And then that surplus would carry over into next year. And then they would reduce our education funding by that $100,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's the advantage to that?
The advantage to all districts is that we have this revenue hole to fill at the state level, and that if districts do not work with the state and do this, that we're going to have to fill that hole some other way, whether it be raising taxes, cutting budgets, or borrowing money. So this is the state's way of circumventing the guidelines set by the feds to utilize that money. And they're asking us to work together as a community, as a whole, as the state of Vermont, to help them try to make up the revenue shortfall by doing the extra paperwork associated with getting those reimbursements. So then the third piece is ESSR money. And this is also new money. It's for FY21. This is money that was given to the state. And anything we draw down from this fund will reduce our education spending dollar for dollar. This money is going to work similar to like the title funds as far as how it's going to be allocated. It's going to be available in GMS, which is our grant program. And we can... There's ways that we can use it to pay for existing expenses, and by doing that, we will have savings in our local budget, and then they will reduce our education funding. So it should net out a zero effect. So let me give the rest of the information, and then we'll go to questions. So those are the three sources of reimbursement. Based on today's information that was given at VSA, they're now projecting that the revenue shortfall is down to $92 million. If you recall, the last time I gave an update, it was at $106 million. So it does continue to decrease, which is great. We're moving in the right direction. So they're using those funding sources I talked about above, but they're also looking at other options, including a decreasing ed funding across the board for FY21. They're looking at decreasing ed funding in FY22. These other options would be if they can't get enough revenue out of the other options that we talked about at first. They're still looking at possibly borrowing, lowering the reserve. Right now we have a 5% reserve, and they can lower that. Or they're also looking at general fund appropriations, so a transfer from the general fund to the ed fund to fill that hole. I think one thing that was also clear today on the conference call, and it was said a few different times, is that there has been no call to school districts at this point to raise for taxes to go up. So they're looking to really fill this shortfall in any way necessary without affecting taxes. So that pretty much covers the update as of today. I think it's a moving target, and I'll continue to provide updates as I get them. But I think we have a direction for now.
So I have a question, Louis. Most towns are just setting their tax rate this month, probably this week or next week at local select board meetings. How is that going to impact, because I know at the GRCSU level, you guys will go in and pull what our payment is from local districts to the SU. If tax bills aren't going out till August, payments aren't going to be due till, let's say, September, everyone's going to be a little off kilter. Are you still going in and pulling that money?
So if I understand your question, it's regarding the GRCU assessment. And so, yes, the first assessment was done July 1st. All of the local budgets approved tax anticipation notes, which allows the districts to borrow funds to be able to pay bills such as the assessment and payroll starting 7/1, because there is a delay with when bills are due and when the school district starts receiving revenue. So the first revenue for the school district doesn't really come in until September. And by then we've already started making payroll to teachers, custodians, there's the assessments, and there's other bills that are being paid. There's electric bills, all those throughout the summer. So there is a need for most districts throughout the state to borrow money to be able to pay bills starting July 1. Does that answer your question?
So do we anticipate drawing down more this year because everything is a little off? Like, will local districts, I know we approved the note. Generally, it's a very short amount because then we receive our tax payment from local communities or the state or whatever. Since those have all been moved out, since people had till July 15th to file taxes, you anticipate that we'll be drawing down more on the notes for each district this year?
Not that I'm aware of. I haven't heard about any delays in the school district receiving funds. The first payment comes from the state in September, and not from the local districts, or I'm sorry, the local towns. And then the local town money usually starts coming in after that, sometime in the fall, depending on when the first tax payments are due. But they still have that obligation to pay us. So I don't plan on cash flow changing significantly at this time.
Food service renewal?
I actually had a question
Oh, sorry.
real quick, sorry. Louis, I just had a question going back to the CARES money. So basically is with you said subject specific and unbudgeted money. So will schools get reimbursed for that without having that come out of the ed fund?
Yes. So those are the two forms of reimbursement. Whether it be there's the CFR unbudgeted money, so all the money that we spent in the spring for PPE, any of our remote costs for Chromebooks or toners, supplies for the buildings, all of those we should receive reimbursement for with no education fund impact. And then right now we're looking at purchasing Chromebooks for all of our students, so that if we have to go remote again, not Chromebooks for all of our, we're looking to buy Chromebooks for all of our students that don't have Chromebooks, so that we have enough to supply one to everybody, as well as some teacher or staff computers, so that if we do go remote again, everybody has the machinery to be able to do that efficiently. So we're looking at purchasing those and putting those through the CRF funds. Those would all have no education fund impact. That we would be reimbursed. As long as there's enough in that fund, we should be reimbursed at 100%. And then the other ones were the food service for like delivery of meals, the cost to buy the containers for the hot meals, and then ventilation. A lot of our schools are working with Efficiency Vermont to improve the school ventilation, whether it be through air purifiers or HVAC systems or whatever their school needs. And those will all be reimbursed with no education fund impact.
All right, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that I have that right. And are you going to be putting, like probably for local districts, something together on how much was spent, or is that irrelevant?
Yeah, so we're in the process of pulling it together right now. When this started, we started just a Google tracking sheet where anytime an item was purchased that was COVID related, we had the secretaries in the schools or the business office payroll or business office bookkeepers, when they were making those payments, just add that item to the tracking sheet. And right now they're going through the process of pulling all the invoices so that we can submit for reimbursement. So what's going to happen, all of those expenses hit your local budgets and is included in the expenses that you've seen so far. We're working on closing the year right now. So in this process, I've created new funds for all COVID related expenses. So over the course of the next few days, I will be taking all of those expenses that were purchased and moving them from the local budget to this COVID fund. And then we'll create a receivable from the state for the reimbursement of those expenses. And I can report that out at the August meeting, how much we're waiting for reimbursement at that time. I think the number in the spring was pretty minimal. We didn't do a lot of purchases. I think the big stuff that we're looking at is right now that we're looking at preparing for the reopening of schools with the Chromebooks. It's since we were remote before, we kind of just made do with what we had. But right now we're trying to do it better. We're buying more computers. We're buying the plexiglass, the PPE, all of the stuff for the schools for the possible reopening. So the expenses that we're going to have this summer are going to far outweigh what we had in the spring.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
How many Chromebooks are we looking to purchase? Do we have schools in our SU that currently have one-to-one?
The real adding of the Chromebooks were for grades that generally share carts in some of the buildings. So now we're going completely K to 12. So even if a school requested that, there was light use in 2 classrooms, now as it is, we've just added them regardless. And so then there's been broken ones or ones we project after seeing their condition that they'll be broken. So it's about give or take about $120,000 so far of Chromebook purchases to reach the levels that we need for the entire student body.
So how many schools were using carts or didn't have one-to-one Chromebooks when this all started in March?
They all use carts to a greater or lesser degree. Usually it's just the younger grades that had shared carts. Like, for example, in West Rutland, Pulteney, there was a lot of shared carts because, they weren't 100% being used. They were being used like 25%, and they could set up a schedule where, the cart gets used by one class and then switch to another class, and the teachers kind of scheduled their curriculum work or, around the Chromebooks like that. But now with this, any student at any time could be doing remote learning. So it's like we just literally have to cover our entire student count for the next year. with the exception, obviously, of pre-K. So yeah, when all the technicians gave me back all of their condition reports, we estimated the ones that are still with the families that were never returned, and they're probably okay. So it's not like we overbought because, parents didn't return Chromebooks. I mean, these are accurate numbers based on the repairs that we were seeing. I mean, the repairs are much higher with COVID than they were previously in the summer, and which we would, expect to see. Very rushed. There were some grades that never took their Chromebooks home, and they were just home, for 3 months. So, it's really what we expected. And they were all, they're all going to go coded to the Lewis's COVID line, and hopefully they'll be covered.
I have one more question. And are we buying Chromebooks for all employees also? Is that what I understood Louis to say?
Not particularly. The technical capabilities of the teachers have to be increased. So whereas some teachers got by last year with a Chromebook, like a large teacher-sized Chromebook, they can't do that this year, especially if they have classes where they may have to be teaching remote and doing remote instruction and powering a smart board and have cameras on, and then be doing their own work. Some will have to be transitioned from Chromebooks to Windows laptops. We don't have those numbers yet, and those orders have not been made. But there is going to be an increased number of Windows laptops in use because the Chromebooks have a graphics processor really not attuned to live streaming. They were never meant for that purpose, to have a video camera that can be guy. So we're assessing that. We're still trying to get our head around it because the SPED department needs new machines. Each building needs new machines are in order. In Pulteney, we're going to be replacing a lot of the teacher Chromebooks with laptops because they were just not really good with video conferencing, and we're going to actually be increasing it to live streaming for some classes. So we don't have a number around that. We generally use the folding Chromebooks with the touch screens for the younger grades, and then we use the ruggedized ones for grades 4 and above. And that's consistent throughout the 8 schools.
Okay, it's not so, I'm sorry, I wasn't asking so much about teachers. I certainly understand the upgrades for them and the need for that. I guess I'm thinking more like support staff or specials and like that. Are those people, are we purchasing Chromebooks for every member of the support staff?
Generally speaking, yes. There's some buildings like Rutland Town that in the past have preferred not to have paras and some other support staff to have machines while they're working on the student's machine. It's the kind of the model that they should be following is, focusing on the student and their machine. And then there's Chromebooks in like the teacher's lounge. If they need to do their timesheet or look something up, they could do that on their break. But it was never really a push. At least that's how I was directed by other administrators to have the support staff. And I kind of agree with that just on a technical basis because, if they're focusing on their Chromebook while they're working on a student, there's an encouragement to do their own thing rather than focus on what the student is doing. And as a support staff person, I don't want to go into another department and say, but I mean, just from what I've seen, traffic shaping wise.
I can speak to that a little, Greg.
Okay.
We have tried to not have support staff with machines in classes when they're supposed to be focused on students. I think one of our concerns, though, for this year is that some, if we have to go remote again, some will need, because we've got to up what we were doing from last year with students. So they may need to have more interaction with students. But I'm certainly not looking to have every support staff person have their own device.
If I could break in, Chris,
Yep.
I'm Superintendent Chris. What I'm questioning is, Chris, is this something that maybe you should think of or think about pending some stuff that's going on in the background on other meetings?
I'm sorry, you said it again.
She's talking about. Can you mute us?
I think, Lisa, do you get what I'm going at after here? As far as support staff getting Chromebooks or laptops?
Just go ahead. So Lynette, that is something that we, yes, it's in discussion.
Okay, that's all I wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, Lewis, food service renewal?
This item was taken care of last month. I think it was just a carry forward and it was never removed from the agenda.
So do you have anything else, Lewis, or you're done?
I have nothing else for open session. I have something for executive session.
Okay. All right, Chris Sell, Superintendent, your moment to shine.
My moments are here. So everyone should have received a copy of the return to school plan that I think Wendy sent this afternoon. There's a lot of information in here. I just quickly go through just through the different slides, but as we know that the criteria of decision making for our reopening plans for the fall and actually for this whole school year, it really is a combination of guidance from the AOE, Vermont Department of Health, and the third aspect of this is the COVID-19 coordinator, which is Dr. Ciccarelli, who provides kind of an overview of the health and safety operations for us, and provides myself, the others, central office admins, as well as building administration staff with kind of a breakdown of what this really means when we look at classroom spaces or schools or other things. So we do have three scenarios that we have to plan for. We're all aware of. We have step one, which is what we were in last spring, which is completely remote learning. Schools are closed. Step two is what will be open up in the fall, which is schools are open for in-person instruction, but there are physical distancing measures, as well as it's restricted to children who live in the local geographic area only. While step three is the ideal scenarios, we shift to that where in-person instruction, there will be still some distancing measures, but there still is a restricted attendance, obviously, to those from limited transmission areas. And that's something which you're going to see is the Dan French and other superintendents talk about is it really is going to be more of a localized decision, where last spring was more of a statewide approach to an outbreak. Moving forward, if there is an outbreak, let's say up north in Winooski, here at the GRCSU, we should be able to operate without any interruption. It'll be kind of localized and handled a case-by-case, community-by-community scenario. So, in addition, I just kind of listed just the indicators. You can take a look at the metrics that are used as we move between each of these steps. Obviously, based on symptoms, cases, and hospital readiness. As you can see, Vermont is in a very good position currently. I think we are the best in the country in terms of cases and how things have been handled, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a month from now or 2 months from now, that might still be. We might, hopefully we'll continue to trend upwards, but this is a very fluid situation that's, things will change on a day-to-day basis. So as we put forth or recommend certain plans, with the understanding that there's a plan as of July 22nd, that August 22nd, things may change, may have to change just based on these three indicators. As we put together these plans, we had input from a variety of individuals and groups. Obviously, the administrative team, both central office heads, building admins, the Teachers Association, and staff took part in task force workshops. I think school nurses have played a huge role, obviously, because as the state released the operational and instructional, most of the guidance was on the operational, the health and safety. So school nurses have played a huge part, as well as Dr. Ciccarelli, and help us understand what that means for the health and the safety of our students and our staff. If, like I said before, the faculty and staff play roles. The instructional coaches have helped behind the scenes with just in terms of looking at what in-person and remote learning would look like in each of these steps, and have helped provide training and scenarios, training scenarios for our staff this summer as well as moving forward. And last, we've also received input from parents and families regarding what this might look like. Some basic safety precautions for faculty and staff, because this is a concern as we look to move to reopening. As I said before, safety is paramount of all our decisions. And so therefore, we want to make sure that if we do move to an in-person learning, that we can ensure that we've done everything we can to mitigate the risk for both our staff and our students. And so obviously we are looking at professional development, operational procedure training. That is going to be key at the beginning of the school year, that we provide our staff with appropriate professional development around not just instructional pieces, but more of the operational in terms of how to safely handle, move into classroom spaces, common areas, handle the flow of students both in and out of the building and from class to class. The operational procedure will be important as well, because we do have, even though we are in, say, a COVID situation, we're still expected to do practice fire drills, lockdown drills, other things along those lines. So we are asking our staff to basically re-engineer the school and rethink all the things that we are going to do. So it's important for the building admins and central office admins to prepare our staff appropriately, so they're putting themselves and the students in the best possible situation. Masks will be required for all students, staff members, and anyone in their building. That's just it's a state requirement. It goes beyond us. It's not a local decision. That is a statewide decision. The universal SU health screening before boarding school buses or entering school buildings for all staff and students. This is another requirement. In order for this to work, we have to have this screen as well as the mask. The screen is something that, like I said, we're probably expecting a little more guidance. I think probably the next week or two, what it may look like from a logistics standpoint. But the purpose beyond this is create a safe perimeter for our students and for our staff. So when anyone enters the building, we can be assured that they are in a healthy position, as best as we can, I guess to say. So there will be temperature checks. There will be kind of an attestation form to answer a couple questions. And that, like I said, that will be done before students board the school bus or before students enter the school building. The breakdown of that in terms of how it's going to look, and you'll hear about this a little bit later, we are developing building-specific plans in terms of what this may look like. There will be certain SU-wide measures that take place in all of our schools, but we also have to look at the unique aspects of each of our buildings, each of our facilities, as well as the student population and staff population. So I've asked all of our building administrators by August 1st to release a building-wide plan, which will have very specific operational procedures for all these things that we're going to be talking about today. From, like I said, from the screening process, boarding school buses, entering the school building, moving in the hallway, cafeteria, all these things. Like I said, the building-specific forms will really get into the details of all of that. And we talked before about ongoing professional development for in-person and remote learning. That is important, that we know that that's a reality, at least for this year, that we will be moving between the two. Remote learning, we will find ourselves in remote learning at one point or another this year. We will have a snow day. That's just the reality. We live in Vermont. We will probably have some snow. We'll probably have some bad weather days. But one of the things we'll see is these snow days will look a little bit differently than they have in the past, where snow days will be still expected to be learning days for our students. So therefore, we won't have to have these gaps in learning or this interruption to our to the child's educational process. Moving on to our learning plan proposals. Tonight I have two proposals. I think both are very good plans, but I think considering where we're at today in terms of with we're in a very good situation here in our communities, so in the state of Vermont, and looking at the AOE guidance, Department of Health guidance, that we can safely, bring both students and staff in schools and still follow, all the guidance that's listed in the Safe and Healthy Schools. The one thing that I mentioned on Monday at the GRCSU, this is where the size of our schools has worked to our advantage. There are many times where we lament maybe a lower enrollment, but in this particular case is where the lower enrollments has helped us because of the fact that we, and I say we, Dr. Ciccarelli, building administrators, school nurses, myself, other staff, walked each building, went classroom by classroom, space by space, and really looked at whether or not this could be done. And we found that with max capacity in each of our buildings, that means our current enrollment, that we found that with the social distancing in each of our classroom spaces, that we can bring all the kids back. So with that being said, that moves us into Model A. The Model A, our proposal is that we'll move it to an in-person learning 5 days a week. Now with that in-person learning, there will be appropriate social distance. There'll be a mandatory mask requirement for all students and staff. Now there are two caveats or exceptions. This is straight from the guidance from the states. Facial coverings are developmentally appropriate when children can properly put on, take off, and not touch or suck on the covering. So obviously with some of our earlier or younger kids, there might be some further guidance in terms of that, like pre-K or kindergarten students. We also have students who have medical or behavioral reasons for not wearing a facial covering should not be required to wear one. These decisions should be made in partnership with the healthcare provider and school nurse. So there are certain situations in which a student, based upon medical condition, will be in the building without a mask. But that is something which we, like I said, will be the school nurse, between the school nurse, Dr. Ciccarelli, and our healthcare provider will make that for that student. So therefore, no other students or staff necessarily, their health might be compromised by this. Like I said, the in-person learning will be all buildings and it'll be all grade levels. If you've seen the guidance from AOE, like I said, that they've really enforced the in-person learning, particularly for the K through 6 band. But as we looked at through the 7 through 12 band, we can offer in-person learning 5 days a week because of the size of our schools. We don't have the same unique, problem that some of the larger high schools have, where they have to go to an alternating day just because they have too many kids just safely fit into school at one time. Another aspect of Model A, of both models actually, is there will be a remote learning option. This is something that was released last week on the 15th by Dan French, the hybrid learning model. There was a lot of flexibility with this hybrid learning model, but we will have a remote learning option for our families. And this is going to look, let Lisa talk about this in a second, but this will look different than it looked in the spring. The remote learning option in the spring was one that was done kind of out of necessity. One of the things I was most proud of with our GRCSU was how, without missing a beat, that we were able to quickly mobilize and get a remote learning plan in place so our kids, there was a huge loss of learning during this time. I know that up where I live, up in the Cornwall area, my daughter had 2 weeks off. And during those 2 weeks, it was just while they were trying to figure out what to do, we didn't take those 2 weeks. Our teachers did a phenomenal job. Our instructional coaches, our building administrators, getting things ready to go, and made the best of the situation. Was it perfect? No, but there were a lot of great things. There were a lot of room for improvement, but we've learned a lot from that remote learning from last spring. So as we have this option this fall, it will look a little bit different. One of the key aspects of this is we do expect, it will be asynchronous. So students, or families who choose a remote learning option will be expected to attend in one capacity or another during the school day. It will look differently. It's not going to be when they see fit or when they want to. It's like, say, if there's a high school chemistry course that's being at 10 o'clock, that student will be expected to log in between 10 and 10:30 to interact with his or her peers as well as the classroom teacher. Lisa, you want to talk a little bit more about this? Or
Sure. So we are, there's an instruction and technology task force, and we have been working, there's 20 plus people on the committee to try and identify some instructional planning around this. So there are a few pieces we've been able to put in place or in process. The first is that we've selected a single learning management system so that all students will receive assignments through Google Classroom. That's pre-K through 12. So it'll be much easier for us to provide supports for teachers because they're all using the same tool, but also supports for students and families in terms of like instructional videos, how-to guides, how do you log on, how do you check your kids' assignments, how do you help them find things. And we're asking all of our teachers to direct every assignment that they give to students through that platform. So students have one place to go look and all of their learning materials will be there. We're also looking at a schedule or agenda plan. So taking the weekly learning menu concept from last year and really turning it into something that has some timing to it. As Chris was saying, if you're a fifth grade student, you're going to get a schedule that tells you what time to log on for morning meeting, what time to log on for your math lesson, what time to log on for your guided reading group, all of those pieces throughout the day where a teacher would be live streaming instruction from a classroom for you will be outlined for you in advance so you and your family can plan for the week and can see what you need to do. Also, that makes it manageable for our teachers. It's very important that our teachers are able to adequately plan for high quality instruction every day during this period. Our kids have already had a big gap with some lost learning time, and we want to make sure that we're able to fill that as completely as we can, given that we'll still have in and out and remote situations this spring. So we really want to make sure that our teachers can plan high quality lessons, and those lessons can be used for both the children in front of them and the children at home. We also expect that kids are going to have disruptions. So if a child potentially could have been exposed to someone with COVID and they need to self-quarantine for 14 days, they're going to be out of school just for that short period of time. Or if they have a fever and they need to make sure that it's just a common run-of-the-mill cold like so many children get and not COVID, they're going to need some days to get tested and or to quarantine. So lots of reasons why kids might be in and out, not just kids who are only learning remotely. So we're trying to plan structures and procedures and systems that are going to work either way so kids can get what they need wherever they are. In addition to that, we're trying to really clarify the expectations for students and families and teachers right up front. We had to figure out all of those things in the spring very quickly. How much instruction should be taking place? How many hours of work was reasonable? What did we want in terms of live instruction for students? How many times should they have to log on during a week? And we really, we figured some things out for the continuity of learning plan, but we want to raise the bar. Yeah, this is full-time school coming back in the fall. We are ready. We've had more time to prepare. So we're trying to really clearly outline those expectations and get them out to everybody so that people know what they're signing up for with the different options. And I just have to commend the folks on that task force. They've been working incredibly hard. We have very long, challenging meetings trying to figure out really complex problems with a very large group online. And I appreciate Greg and Christine are both on that group with me. And I appreciate all their hard work and the teachers and folks who are there.
in addition to, thanks Lisa, in addition to things that Lisa had stated, I just want to stress that the family would choose the remote learning option, and it's ideal for obviously for a student who is considered as high risk, maybe a medical concern or along those lines, or if a family just does not feel safe, particularly sending their child to school in the fall, they do have this option. But the students will be held to the same set of expectations and standards as the students who are attending in person. It will not be a lesser amount of standards or proficiency they'll be expected to meet. It'll be the same thing, just kind of replicated through a remote learning option. The one thing we are working on, and this is that we have more detail in the building specific plans about what this looks like, but there will be a set of expectations for across the SU about what, like say, remote learning looks like for say a third grade or for our high school 7 through 12 band in terms of workload. But we are going to ask that our families do not, when they make a decision, that they stay with that. And we'll be discussing this as an admin team, what a reasonable length of time. What we don't want to happen is a family just decides one day, you'll go to school, the next day, well, you know what, let's take, I don't feel safe today, and then come back. So I think out of fairness to our classroom teachers, to everyone else, for consistency, we really want to make sure that families, make that decision, and then therefore they can't necessarily transition back and forth as they see fit. That they're really make a decision. We'll stay with that, and we'll do our best to educate the kids in both settings. Two other things I know that some concerns that were brought up during the spring was the fact that obviously students with IEPs or 504s, or just in terms of how we handle some more special education issues. And I know that's talking with Christine and Kimberly, we're developing plans to make sure that appropriate measures and precautions are in place for related service delivery and special education services. In addition, the school-based teams are obviously going to review the IEPs, 504s, and make changes to accommodations and modifications based upon building needs and student needs. We recognize that during the spring that there are some areas which we could have done better with regards to this. Our goal is, as we begin this model in the fall, that every single one of our kids will receive a high quality education, and we'll make sure that all students receive these services, the support that they need in order for that to happen. And that is our goal. Model B is a little bit different in terms of we still have the in-person learning and we still have the remote learning option. Where the difference is the fact that the Model B is a 4-day model, where Model A was the students, all students would be in the building for 5 days. Model B is the students would be in the building for 4 days. So on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And on Wednesday, all students would be in a remote learning environment. On those Wednesdays, and the reason for the logic or rationale behind this is, first of all, on Wednesday, the students will still be expected to attend, remotely. We'll have like a half-day model where it'll provide our staff an opportunity to still meet one-on-one, do some small group intervention with some of the students who they may not have had an opportunity to as well. Also, some teachers may still have an opportunity to meet with their class during this time, but it'll just be done remotely. As we look at this year, I said this to a couple of our admins this morning. Our custodial maintenance staff has been doing a phenomenal job, but we also started to realize as we did building walkthroughs how stretched they're going to be during the course of the week. In an in-person learning environment, they are going to have to be cleaning, monitoring the buildings. So they're going to be pulled away from a lot of the things that they would normally do during the course of their day, where they're going to have to be wiping surfaces down, continually checking and cleaning bathrooms, just monitoring the hallways if they need to wipe them down, provide supplies. That is going to be their priority is doing so. So with a Wednesday, it also allows for them to tend to some of the other things that they may not get to on the other 4 days. Because after school ends, they have to do a deep clean of the building. And that's going to be very time consuming for our maintenance staff. So we provide our maintenance staff a little more time to clean as well as to take care of the building, because there are a lot of things that may fall by the wayside that we don't necessarily want that to happen. We also provide with the Wednesday, during the second half of the day, a lot of time for professional learning and collaboration. There are a lot of complexities with this model. Regardless of what model we would move to, whether it be completely remote, alternating days, you're going to hear a lot of different models in the next coming weeks. There's a lot of professional learning that goes along with this. We have this hybrid, high flux model right now that our teachers will do very well with, but there still has to be a lot of support, a lot of training around with this. So we need to make sure that we're continuing providing support for them on these days. The biggest issue, at least early on, is we know that there are going to be some procedural operational issues that we need to address building-wide. In a 5-day model, we may not necessarily have time to do this. On this Wednesday, during this half day, after we have this, the second half of the Wednesday, we do have an opportunity for buildings to meet as staff and address any sort of procedural or operational issues that they may find. And that's important because as we develop these plans, we go through all sorts of walkthrough scenarios. We know that day 1 or day 2, we might notice some logistical issues. Maybe if we're using 3 or 4 different entrances, we might find that there might be an issue here or there. So this Wednesday allows us, at least early on, to quickly address that, adjust, and move forward. And so, like I said, the students would be expected to still attend school remotely on these days. So.
And staff would be.
Yes, like I said, staff would be in schools on those days. Staff would not be at home. They would be in school on those days, working there. So that would be a work day for staff. Skipping to the last part, I talked before about that safe perimeter. It said there will be temperature scans. All students and staff will be expected to be screened before they're walking in the building. I know that next year, I said if I move from, say, Rutland Town to Middletown and go over to West Rutland, each time I'll expect to be screened and have my temperature checked as I walk in the building. It's a slight inconvenience, but I don't mind doing it. That'll be fine. I have masks in my car that I'm ready to go in any sort of scenario situation. The bus situation, that's before getting on the bus and before entering the building. Part of the guidance that we're hoping to get from Dan French by the end of this month is a little more guidance around how the logistics of the bus in terms of how we're going to necessarily screen. Currently, we're looking at providing bus monitors, which would be some of our staff who will assist with this process. But we know that in screening students, if you have, say, 50 kids on a bus and you're trying to screen kids or go through this process, it can be very time consuming. So we're looking at how we can adjust bus routes, how we can better handle these sorts of things. But that's a building specific issue that the administrators are working through. And then there are set procedures for students and staff who have symptoms of COVID-19. That is in the guidance that we have. So those procedures will be put into place at all buildings and all SU facilities. And then contact tracing, we will be doing contact tracing. Classrooms will be expected to do assigned seating, assigned locations. So if God forbid something would happen in one of our schools, that we will be able to provide the Department of Health with some contact tracing, so we can quickly provide a best course of action for that time on. Some other SU-wide safety precautions. Obviously, we'll be using multiple entrances. For those who know that in the past, it does kind of fly in the face of what school security is. While we're restricting access, but we have worked with the building administrators on looking at how we can use multiple entrances to better improve the flow of students in and out of the building without compromising the safety of the students and staff. Those buildings will be monitored. They'll be by staff members. When all students are in, the doors will be locked, and we'll still have our same procedures in place for guests, which will be a little bit different anyways, but that'll be considered a building-specific thing. We will be eliminating and controlling hallway and movement throughout the school day. That is something which we will be doing, obviously, but it might be something that's putting a line down a hallway, having state of the right. Could be developing in one building just a one-way flow through the building. So kids are going to have to relearn how to walk through the buildings at times, just to make sure that we are limiting just control and in contact with each other. Obviously, social distancing when appropriate, but like I said, in each classroom, we have found a way that we can meet the 6-foot mandates with all students facing the same direction, so that as possible in the hallway. So we will do our best to keep that social distancing in place. That's where teachers will work with students on what that would look like. Hand washing, hand sanitizers upon entering and exiting the building after using the bathroom and on a regular basis. Teachers will be supplied with, cleaning wipes as well as hand sanitizer in each of the classrooms. We will be talking with teachers about how to help monitor the cleanliness of the classrooms, but it will be something which we'll have to work with. And I know this is something which people think that's more of an elementary school, but those who work in high school, though, the high school kids are just as many issues with hand washing than as the second or third grade kids. So we are going to have to remind high schoolers as well about hand washing and hand sanitizers. They could be just as dirty as the next kid. Like I said before, assigned seating in classrooms and on the school bus. I know I spoke with Debbie and Sarah over Rutland Town. They already have assigned seating on the school buses, so their school buses are already in compliance. And I think it's the same in other schools as well. Students will carry backpacks to their classrooms. That is something which we will be doing. I know that it's a building-based decision with regards to lockers. I am encouraging, at least initially, for us not to use lockers in schools just until we can see what the flow looks like. And the reason for that is lockers in the hallways promote congestion and congregation. And that's one of the things that we're trying to avoid is just congregating in the hallways. So during the fall months or it should be warm enough where the kids shouldn't have a lot outside their backpacks. Masks, that's important. Also, we are looking for intentional breaks. We are encouraging teachers to get outside as much as possible with their students, because once the students are outside, they, as long as they're social distancing, they do not need to wear masks. It will be a nice break for them. In each of our buildings, we are looking at the redesign of our nursing offices to allow for an isolation control area. And that's part of the guidance that was given to us by the AOE with regards to if a student or staff member presents as having one of the symptoms of the coronavirus. Individual classroom materials, there will be limited sharing. That will be, I guess, good for some students who don't like to share, but for others it might be more of a problem. But I think it's more the elementary school. We discussed having like little buckets or little like Tupperware bins where they have all their individual set of Legos or their manipulatives or any sort of other toy or else that they'll all have those things that will be theirs alone. So, and I said for building and classrooms will be cleaned on a regular basis, and by regular means as often as we can during the course of the day. But a deep cleaning will happen of each building each evening. It's what we were doing during the springtime. Most of our buildings have electrostatic sprayers, which they can quickly spray down facilities and classroom spaces. And for those that do not have them, obviously we're taking an SU-wide approach to cleaning. We will be sharing resources, which means we may be moving maintenance custodial staff over to assist with the deep cleaning of a building or sharing of materials or resources. I'm almost done here. General food, lunchtime precautions. Obviously, breakfast and lunch will still be provided in a safe and healthy environment. But the expectation is that breakfast and lunch will be served in classrooms at all levels. And that's something which we've talking with J.O. Westrella and Joe at Poultney, and then myself at Proctor until Bob Johnson comes in on August 1st. We have built out schedules that that students will have access to classroom space to eat their lunch. We also are working with I do believe the providing appropriate compost bins for each classroom so that our students can't put food scraps in there, so it's not just going in the trash. So we're not out of compliance there as well. Students and staff are expected to wash hands before and after meals. Meals will be prepackaged or prepared as grab and go by food service. We've asked our building administrators to work with their food service provider, which is the same in most of our buildings, but to steer clear of more of the hot lunch or like the pizzas or some of the other things that kids like, but really more towards a more user-friendly grab and go, which it might be a brown bag lunch or something that can be easily prepared. And so we'll bring like a box of food to the classroom, and then we can quickly disseminate in a safe manner these lunches to those students that provide it. Students will still be allowed to bring lunch, but they'll be allowed to retrieve it from their backpack. But just to note that it really shouldn't be happening anyways, but I know that some buildings have been allowed students to use microwaves during the course of the heat their lunches. That is a Obviously it's a concern on a normal basis that they're doing this because the risk of injury or burning themselves with hot foods. But microwaves and refrigerators will be taken out of classrooms, so it's important to note that parents have to pack accordingly. They'll have to obviously use a thermos or insulated lunch container or sack, because students will not have a place to refrigerate. But as a kid growing up, I can tell you I've had many lukewarm bologna sandwiches growing up, and I'm still here. Maybe that's part of my problem, I guess, was all those lukewarm bologna sandwiches, to tell you the truth. But like I said, that's just something to keep note of. Students will eat with social distance measures in place to allow for removal of masks. As I said before, we are encouraging if you can get the kids outside for lunch, let's get them outside because that's the safest place for them to remove their mask, socially distance, get some fresh air, and eat their lunch. If they they have to stay in the classroom, we will make sure that they're still socially distanced, but they said they will be allowed to remove their mask, obviously, to eat or drink during that time. We will be asking all teachers to identify a space in their classroom for allergy-free tables or a space if needed. Some classrooms may not need that based upon the composition of the class, but if there is an issue with a student with a mild allergy, that could just be sit at a different location just as they would in normal cafeteria. That's fine. Students with severe allergies obviously will be assigned locations that would be safer for them to have that. To have their lunch. So we don't want to put them at a double risk there. And like I said before, we still look to have elementary school students will have recess outside during the course of the day. I do believe that's an important part of development for young kids to have movement, to be outside and play. It'll look a little bit different, obviously, but they still have time to go out, stretch legs, run around. But as I said before, they will be allowed to take their masks off while doing this. And the last, and I referenced this before, by August 1st, each GRCSU school will have a building-specific reopening plan. And I've asked them to have it in a format such as this. There'll also be some, like I said, be very specific plans that are unique to each building. Right? These plans contain health screening information, internext in the building protocols, more specifically breakfast, lunch plans, operational procedural plans, and obviously issues with instruction and curriculum that will be addressed. I know that was lengthy, but just do you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, Chris, this is Clarence. I have a couple of questions. First off, what do I call it? The return to school plan. When the office puts out something like this, it would be very helpful to me if the pages were numbered when it's the brochure is put together.
Yes.
The way this is, I printed it off. I got 1 million sheets of paper, and I don't keep them in the exact order, and I don't have a stapler that can put that many sheets together. So if they were numbered, that would be very helpful to me. That's one.
Okay.
Two. There's a high probability that there may be an executive order coming down the pipe that says student instruction days will not start until 9/8.
I'm aware of that. So
I've had some correspondence that says it's very likely that that's going to happen.
I think it's one where there is talk of that, but it's one as of right now, it's still just that. But like I said, it's July 22nd. That could vary. We still have a little bit to go before the start of school, and I think one of the reasons why we wanted to get our plan out, I don't think it's early, but I think a lot of people are starting to try to plan for the fall, like what things are going to look like. Obviously childcare and other stuff like that. I said there are some things. I know that Lewis wants to talk in executive session, some other things, I could talk a little bit more about that in length in executive session. And the only reason why I would talk more about that, like, because there are certain things right now that are not necessarily for public consumption because it technically hasn't been released as of yet, if that's okay.
Chris, I am, this is Meredith. I have heard that, well, I know that an independent school is using a health or a COVID app to monitor temperature and symptoms. And this app is used before you leave your home. And that gives you a more consistent temperature rather than moving around. And it also obviously helps with not having to post somebody on the bus, or even if you had somebody on the bus, they would hand them a piece of paper that said they're cleared for the day or something like that. Has that been considered at all?
Yes, and that'll be part, you'll see that in the more specific plan.
You gotta give me just a sec to
sorry.
it takes
Okay,
a sec.
Yes, Meredith, that is a consideration. We do have, the school nurses are currently working on that. We are, I know Dan French discussed a statewide app that could potentially be used. But I think while we're waiting for that app, what I've asked the nurses to do is to put together a form to help expedite the process that, parents can screen at home. And so therefore a student can present the form before boarding the bus or walking into school. But it's no different than when I come into a central office every day. I sign the form and I do take my temperature before I leave. And, depending on the drive in, my temperature's, same or not, but but we will find a way to expedite the process, but without compromising the safety or health of students or staff.
That's great, because I'm sure that could save a lot of time, even if it's not in 100% use. If you can get it in 90% use, you're going to be saving a lot of time and energy, and obviously getting more accurate information.
We don't want 2 to 3 hour bus routes. That's not our goal. So, and I think if we were really trying to do a screen for every single kid, you'd spend more time screening kids and actually educating kids. So I think, Dan, discussion with that. These are things, obviously, at a state level, they're taking a look at. There might be more guidance coming down by August 1st with regards to the health screen and the logistics aspect of that. But like I said, our goal would be to, if every parent self-screens and presents that form, then we're fine. That would help us move through the process. Our goal is to get the kids back into the building and get going with teaching them.
Chris, this is Kristen. First, this is amazing work that you all have put together, and thank you for what you have been able to do based on waiting for what the state says and getting everybody together and walking buildings and all the logistical and organizational stuff that you've done. So thank you very much. And I am looking forward to building plans as well, which I know is even more work on top of this. So I just have a couple questions. One, I had just been looking into thermometers just myself and came across a company called Kinza Inc. And these wouldn't be for like school use, they'd be for families to use. But Kinza is a young company. I think they're 3 or 4 years old, and they developed their tracking system. They have their own app. I believe if there's school nurse buy-in and family buy-in, schools and communities can get these either at reduced cost or free. So I don't know much about that program. I know that they've been used across the country for COVID. They originally designed them to use for flu outbreaks for schools, specifically for schools, but they are contact thermometers. So you're either doing them, in the ear or the traditional ways. So they're not like, for the radar gun kind. So they are for families to pre-screen before kids go to school, and or a nurse would have one in a school in the normal world without COVID, where you would take a temperature as a forehead swipe or something. So they are providing them free, I think, for participating communities. So I know there's not a lot of extra time, but it might be just something to look at, think about, because this is countrywide, they're tracking the data. So that's just one like FYI. And then my specific questions regarding what you presented here, I'll kind of jump around a little bit. One is about Chromebooks going. So if the plan B with the Wednesday remote, for example, is decided upon, and or we eventually have to go virtually all the way partway through the semester, are Chromebooks going to go regularly back and forth from home to school throughout the term, whether we're face-to-face 100% of the time or online? So that's one question, just because of where that Chromebook goes and what happens to it at home, and then it comes back to school, et cetera, and surfaces and all that kind of stuff. That's just one question I had. And then the other one, and then I'll shut up, has to do with the synchronized on slide 10, I believe it was, the remote learning option, synchronized. I'm just going to go back there myself to remind myself what my question was. So if a student has a situation, I assume that there will be a lot of exceptions in place for specific situations for families and students. But if a student has chosen to be remote learning and they're doing synchronous, but something happens with, that's a lot of that, maybe other people besides parents at home with the kids trying to help them do synchronous learning. So do we have the flexibility there, just to think about the flexibility there of, even though they've chosen to do it virtually, there may be a childcare issue or some other supervisory adult may have to come into the situation at home, and they may not be able to help the student do synchronous learning, at least in a short period of time. Is there flexibility so they could do asynchronous or something else? I guess I'm not sure what the other option would be. So those are my two questions.
So I'll address the last question first, since it's on my mind. But so as with any sort of learning, there's in-person learning, there'll be a synchronous portion. There'll also be an asynchronous portion to learning. So that's just part and parcel of what it's all about. As we look at the synchronous learning, the one thing we want to differentiate is, obviously, it's not going to look like it did in the past spring. There will be certain expectations. And just as we would, we talk about differentiation all the time. I think we have to really take on a case-by-case scenario. And we are aware that things are going to happen. We're in Vermont, the quality of technology may not always be the best, that I'm at home and, it's happened to me before where the internet stalls or slows, and it's problematic. So one of the things that we're working with our staff on moving forward is, obviously, they have a Google Classroom. All staff expect to have their Google Classrooms. And this is just good practice moving forward, because I think even if a student is absent or sick from school, they still should be able to attend or have access to what occurred in the day. Is that if let's say a teacher is, go back to like the release of responsibilities in the I stage, where they're introducing a new concept, and a student is not able to log in at that time, we still are going to ask the teacher to hit record, that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes, and really should be uploaded into their Google Classroom for Wednesday, July 22nd. Here's and so for the student should be able to go back and access that, say at 5:00 p.m. that night, and still be able to access the learning. The one thing we wanted to steer clear of was that during the spring, it really became sometimes like a buffet, particularly for some older kids, like, I'm going to learn what I want to learn, which is, there's some merit to that as well. Like some of our high school kids did very well with that. But I think out of fairness to our classroom teachers, as we're looking at this hybrid, model, that we're not asking them to do double duty, that at 3:00 and then their second shift occurs. And so we really have to look at how do we operate within that. But so within that remote learning option, obviously there will be some asynchronous options as well. We do expect the students to be working outside of those other check-in times, but I know that the AOE has really asked us to provide a little more of a tougher restrictions in terms of what their learning time looks like during the course of the day as well. I know that in the past spring, for some kids, it was a check-in at a morning meeting, and then they went AWOL until the next day when they checked back in. And some kids were doing well with that, while other kids didn't do so well. So we just want to make sure we have an opportunity for students through a structured schedule that they can access learning and access their classroom teacher during that time. But in that scenario, like I said, classroom teachers should work with that individual and have the flexibility to adjust. So that's, I said, we're asking all of our teachers to differentiate, in whether they're in person or remote. That's the same idea. With regards to Chromebooks, I'm going to defer that to it. It is going to be more of a site-based decision. And I look at it in terms of, there is obviously a difference between a high school kid carrying a Chromebook back and forth and, my daughter who's now in 5th grade. I love her to death. She's a great kid, but man, she'd probably leave it on the bus. She'd probably just leave it at school. Who knows where it'd be on a regular basis. If it's not tied to her, she may lose it. But one of the things we have to make sure of is with the fluidity of the situation, we need to understand that we very quickly could move to a remote situation. We might find that, that something happens even in, say, one of our towns that would require us to shut down for a day just while we, take care of or better assess the impact of that, do some contact tracing. Like someone might be at a local work, a person might come from work and all of a sudden test positive. It may not be in school or one of our students, but we may have to then go to remote just until we can better assess the situation. So what we don't want to do is really have that day of being shut down to be seen as a loss of learning, like a day off. It somehow could be, we can keep the flow going as best as we can. And I know with the Chromebooks, that will be problematic, but I think we also, during the spring, we looked at how many students had access to computers or laptops at home, and found that some of our students, did not necessarily have access to that. So I think it would be a situation where we could address that. But I know that during the spring, there were a couple times where I went back down, drove down, and then just to allow a kid to come back and get their Chromebook in the morning so they could do their work because they forgot it or they needed to pick something up. But I think I would not be surprised if a building administrator needed to do that. Most people would do that to find a way to, particularly if it's a quick situation where we have to shut down, we find that bunch of kids, we'd schedule a Chromebook pickup if we had to. The last thing, real quick, the last thing is with regard to the thermometers, if you would email me that information, because I will forward that to Dr. Ciccarelli, so he could take a look at that, and then if we could find a way to get that, any sort of resource would be great. I thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Okay, it may not work for us because we're just such a small district, but I will send the web link. And I actually heard about it on a news story in NPR a couple weeks ago. So they're kind of they're promoting themselves as a company, right? Because they're a startup, but they have been able to predict with their data where they think the next COVID outbreak would be based on people's fevers. Because they get the data immediately when someone's taking their temperature with this device. So they saw the outbreak in Florida and Texas and California and Seattle area like a few weeks before it was sort of in the news. So anyway, just to follow up with Chromebooks, so the idea would be that a student would, assuming when we get them all and everything, a student would be assigned a Chromebook to take home, and it would basically stay at home for when they're doing remote learning. They're not going to be necessarily taking it back and forth. Well, maybe the high school kids would do this, I'm not sure, but like the littler kids anyway, the idea would be to keep it at home so they can do their learning if and when we have to go remote, or if we do that Wednesday option. Is that what I'm hearing, or would it depend on the grade level, I guess?
Yeah, Kristen, it's Lisa. Yes, a lot of it depends on the grade level, and also where things are at in our communities. If we get to a point where we're starting to see numbers rise in communities around us, we'll most likely shift to being more prepared to have to close quickly. If the numbers continue to be very low in the communities surrounding ours, we can take a little more liberty with that. So it's really going to be evolving. But the bottom line is that we want our kids to be equipped to not miss a beat with learning. And we're going to have to figure out some things. I mean, we were talking in one of our task force meetings about teaching the kids how to clean their Chromebooks. And that may just be part of what we do. And every morning you come to school, and the first time that you get out your Chromebook for the day, you're going to open it up and you're going to clean it. And, those are the kind of things that may just have to become part of our everyday classroom routines. Teaching the kids, even after you eat, we're going to need to clean your space. There are lots of times throughout the day where we're going to be working, obviously little guys are going to help them, but our older students, they're going to need to take some independence too, to make sure that they can maintain their own health and safety in their own space.
Okay, thanks. And just one other quick thing that I don't think we can answer yet, but just something I want to ask before I forget, and maybe we can answer it in August, but is just if we anticipate an increase in the number of buses due to spacing issues for any of our districts. So just as a, thinking about budgets and stuff like that.
So currently, as under the guidance, we are under step 3 with busing, which means that in our current form, we would not have to increase the amount of buses for any of our students. I think that goes back to what Meredith was saying. It's important for us to have those forms in place to kind of expedite the process. I know that in certain schools, like Rutland Town has buses, each one of their buses is filled to capacity. But I do think that there will be some families that choose to drive their kids to school, or drop their kids to school off, as opposed to having them ride the bus home. But under step 3, there would not be a need for us to add bus routes at this time. So, and we don't anticipate that. I spoke with each one of the building administrators, and they don't see the need for that. We maybe have to adjust some start times and maybe some dismissal times to accommodate for buses. But we'd ask for start times and end times have to be I know that one school talked about maybe 10 minutes early for people to pick their students up before the buses came, just to be able to safer so the kids aren't congregating out in the common area. So.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
So from what I understand, any of these apps, which generally come with these Bluetooth thermometers, would fall under the category of being paid by COVID money. Is that correct, Louis?
As far as purchasing them for schools or for families?
Well, you would be purchasing them for the school that the family would be using to attend school.
No, I don't believe at this point we have any, unless I missed something, planned to buy thermometers to give to each family. That would be 1,600 thermometers.
No, they come with these apps. There's different companies, like Kristen spoke of one, that provide the whole service, and it's a service that you would be buying and the school would be using instead of having, every single person being checked before they get on the bus or before they walk through the door of a school, so that many of our students would be able to, and families would be able to handle this at home before they step out the door.
I guess I'm still not following. How are they handling it at home without a thermometer at home?
The thermometer comes with the app service.
So that's what I mean. So then we would be buying 1,600 thermometers, wouldn't we?
It's part of the program of the app. It's part of the apps. I just happen to know. I'll say it. Long Trail is using them. Each family will be provided with a Bluetooth thermometer that comes when you sign up for the app. Whether we're purchasing them or it comes with the app that you purchase, it's this is a way, for one thing, you're taking temperature at a time before they're getting on the bus, before they're packing up and going out the door and all this other stuff. It's a much more consistent temperature. And so it enables the statistics to be much more specific.
So Meredith, that's something which we'll definitely look into. Obviously, we have to look at the cost and what that looks like. I mean, to be honest, it sounds like it'd be a great thing to have to help, expedite. I do want to also, like I said, I know that there's a good chance that, further guidance will be coming down from, Dan French and AOE at the end of the month regarding health screens, and there might be some alterations to that. So in the meantime, they said if you have some information from long-term, you could send it to us. We could look into it, have Dr. Ciccarelli and then Lewis and I could discuss that about whether or not it could be used. We could use some of the funding for that. But it does sound like it'd be a worthwhile thing for us.
And my whether it's that or anything else,
sure,
that's going to be covered by this COVID money potentially, right? I mean, this is specifically something we wouldn't need to do if we weren't in this situation.
Yes, it would fall under the a category of an acceptable expense. I guess we'd have to look into what the cost would be. I mean, because there is only a certain amount of money available statewide. So at some point, once all that money's spent, we're not going to be reimbursed at 100%.
So if we're hiring somebody to do all that on the bus and not have an app, how is that covered? That person's would be covered, their employment, to take everyone's temperatures and ask them all the CDC questions?
I mean, at this point, we haven't hired any additional staff.
But we will have to put somebody there.
So Meredith, we'd be looking at our current staffing and see what if we can fill those needs with our current staff. The AOE has discouraged the use of volunteers to assist in these efforts. So if we, our bus monitors would be one of our paraprofessionals or one of our teachers, or even could be someone else who would assist, but they would be currently on staff. But you're right. It's something which we definitely should look into. But like I said before, the guidance that from what I've heard about towards the end, is going to discuss some logistical issues centered around health screens and some of these different things. So we may see that things don't change. We might see that there are some changes. But I think while we're waiting for that guidance, it's smart for us, be prudent for us to take a look at it, start getting some quotes, getting some things ready to go. Because if we can use money for it, it's cost effective. It would make sense for us, particularly because our goal is to get the kids, is not to drag out the process. Because for some of our kids, I know the bus routes can be 45 minutes to sometimes up to an hour, and we're not trying to increase the length of time that a kid spends on a school bus because of this. So anything that can be done that can expedite the process in a safe and healthy manner, we will definitely look into.
And I'm not saying that the app is the only way to go. I'm just saying that we should be being reimbursed for whatever direction we choose, whether it's in-house hire or not. It still costs us money. And I cannot imagine teachers are going to happily raise their hand to volunteer for this spot, and then we have to, give them hours off and cover their time later. So I just want to make sure that whatever it is, that this gets covered by money outside of our budget.
Yes, we have a list from the state of everything that would be an approved expense, and every purchase that we're making, we're tracking, and if it could fall under the COVID expenses, we are coding it to COVID. And we're going to make every attempt possible to try to get reimbursed from the state for all of these expenses that are unbudgeted.
So for anybody sorry, this is Kristen again. For anybody interested, I just put in the chat the Kinza Health website, so you can, they're trying to promote themselves, so it's an advertisement, but they are trying to recruit specifically schools, and you could use this system hopefully once COVID is not such a big deal for flu season and other things. So just FYI. I also sent you an email, Chris and Lisa Madison, with the link. So it's there.
I have a question about the school, the regional superintendent school calendar that runs out of the tech center. Is everybody on the same page, one? And two, where we have kids going to other high schools, and if they're having remote learning days, how are the kids that go to Stafford going to be handled, or is Stafford going to have remote learning days? Has that been discussed? Has Stafford put anything out yet?
So as a student, our understanding, a student who attends Stafford will have to follow the policies of Stafford. So therefore, if Stafford is in-person learning, that student will be expected to participate in in-person learning over at Stafford. If Stafford has a remote learning option, then they will be allowed a remote learning option, but they will have to follow the plan that Stafford has put into place. And like I said, I know some of the ideas that Rutland High has, but they haven't been made official. But like I said, we all know that all schools are looking at a variety of options. But they said any student in Stafford will have to follow their plans, not their home school's plan.
I'm just concerned that if we have students that we're paying tuition on for somebody, are they going to be able to go to the program or not? And we're paying for the transportation to get them there. Is that going to be continued to happen, or is it not? I just wonder if regionally the superintendent's group had addressed that when they were addressing the school calendar, or did that fall by way of the wayside this year with all this other stuff going on?
So, like I said, I can't speak on behalf of Stafford, but I would assume if Stafford is in session, they expect the kids to be in session, they would have a bus that would be able to transport those students from their home location to Stafford. With regards to start dates, Stafford has a hard start date of August 26th. And I know that in talking with the superintendents that regardless of what a local SU decides, I know I've heard that some of the other regional SUs have looked at August 31st start date for schools, that Stafford is still going to start on August 26th. So therefore, let's say a student who attends a local high school, if their school starts August 31st, that student would still have to go back to Stafford on the 26th. So, that they would be following under Stafford's guidance. So like I said, Stafford wants their kids to be in school, and so therefore they're going to find a way to get them there, I would assume.
Okay.
My question, are you gonna?
Yeah. So we have two plans. We have Plan A, Plan B, and if we obviously, I did that for a reason. One is so that we had some options within this model. I want to get your thoughts, feedback upon both. My recommendation, just considering the unique situation, we start off in Model B, which would be the 4-day learning and with a Wednesday remote, and then we would then move into Model A. And the reason why I would suggest Model B first was give us opportunity from an operational and procedural standpoint that we could address issues as we see fit that we may not find out in the first couple of weeks of school, and we can get everything on track. The last thing I do is start off and just have something go awry because it's, I would say poor planning, but just because something just came unforeseen. So that is my recommendation. But like I said, the board, if the board elects to have a start in Plan A, then we have a plan for Plan A. So we are ready to go with either model, either option. So that's where that's the board for discussion. So.
Not everybody discuss it more.
Well, okay, I'll jump in. This is Kristen. So just to be clear, you're asking us to, your recommendation is model B, right? And you would like the board to choose between A and B at this point with the information we have as of today. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm recommending these. I'm asking you to accept this, or if the board decides that if you feel it's the best interest, just begin a model A. The model A is fine. Like I said, either one of these models we're fine with, we can live with. But there is a reason for model B, just because of that one day where we can have time for procedural issues, planning issues as well. It gives a little more lead time there. But like I said, it's a recommendation.
Chris, if I could, if you said that the recommendation is not to start until September, are we going to do that, or are we going to go forward with the 26th, even though the student days won't count?
So as of right now, our calendar states the 26th of August, and that's something which we could discuss. I know I would like to discuss some of these issues in executive session, because there are some issues that, as Clarence had alluded to about the September 8th and some other talks. And I'd like to have that discussion. Maybe that's something we could discuss maybe as we come out of executive session, if that's okay, Lynette?
Okay.
Well, how does everybody feel about starting with one day of middle of the week not in person? And so the model B, I totally see what you are saying, Chris, in terms of why you're recommending that. My instinct is to go the other way, but you guys are the ones working on the ground with this. So my instinct is to go start with A, and then if we need to convert to B. And between this date and our August meeting date, we might decide to go to Plan B because of the amount of cleaning that may be needed if we suddenly have more cases here in the general region. So, yeah, I don't know, but I don't know what other folks think. So I'd like to hear.
I feel strongly that B is a better choice, and starting out cautiously is a good way to go. And then if things stay status quo, then we'll continue in terms of status quo as in rates of infection.
Tim here. I do have two questions, I guess. So I like Model B for the fact that I'd rather see us go from step 2 to step 3 versus step 2 to step 1. I guess my question, which would sway my vote, is do we have a parameter on going to 5 days? Would it be getting to step 3? Would it be October 1st? Would it be some other factor that you can allude to?
Well, obviously, if we move to step 3, that would be that 5 day in person. I think one of the things that Dan French always said, their goal is to get us in and keep us in. And I think if we look at we start off Model B would be the get us in model, and then Model A would be the keep us in model. And so in terms of when that would happen, like I said, obviously step 3 would move quickly into that, step A. I also, in talking with some building admins, felt that, if within the first couple of weeks, we could move to that Model A, even without being in step 3. It really could be a SU-wide decision. If in the first 2 weeks we feel that we're okay, we're in a good place, we have everything down procedurally, we could move into the Model A model within a couple weeks. Like I said, the reason why Model B was put in place, and when I discussed this with the union and admin, just felt that there are a lot of unknowns right now that we're not taking into consideration. And as Kristen alluded to, we might find that if things are okay, and depending on the start date, if all of a sudden they say September 8th, we may not need a Model B. We may have had more than enough time to work out kinks and do everything else, and we might just be able to start off in a Model A. And that was part of the reason why I'm bringing two proposals, because I envisioned, our worst case scenario, and I say it's worst case, would be a Model B. Our best case is a Model A, and I think both are, well thought out. I think both work well. But so like I said, it's obviously step 3 would be an easy one, but I don't necessarily always want to wait necessarily until step 3 either, because that might come a little bit later than we have. So
Wednesdays are early release anyway, so it's really the least student contact.
That was one of the reasons why we moved that to a Wednesday. Yes.
That's all for me. Thanks.
I would like to also consider the stress factor that this is going to be on all of the kids and all of the staff, and having a break in the beginning as they see how well, hopefully, it all is working. It would be really important mentally. So I really don't want to see straight ahead 5 days a week right away.
So, and Meredith, I agree, and I like I said, I want to reiterate that day, that remote learning day, teachers obviously would still be, they'd be in the buildings, still working on, continue to improve, whether it be the hybrid model or in-person professional learning. But I do think, like I said, from that mental break, they would find that mental break would come as they're working together, and as well as building, like I said, building the flanks. I think our teachers want to be back in the building, and they want it to be intentional, how we continue to work and progress, so we are all, like I said, 5 days a week, and things are going well.
My thoughts on this issue from Wellspring's point of view, or from my point of view, are there are 3 of us here that are hearing this and trying to make some kind of decision and weigh things out. We have 4 more board members. This really should be discussed at our board level with our building administrators. I can see some very positive things about the 5 days. I can see some good things about having the Wednesday off, that there is some merit to it. I'm not totally opposed at this point, but I'm not ready to jump into it. I'm trying to think about, maybe I'm being too much of a pessimist, but between now and the time that happens, about the middle of August, we're going to have some tax bills land in our community. And then we're going to tell people that we're only going to have their kids in school 4 out of the 5 days. That's what it'll be perceived as. We'll never pass another budget. I think the perception to sell is really going to be tough.
So, Clarence, I understand. I do think one of the things we have to understand too is, while we want to be prudent about this, we want to be very cautious as we proceed, there are a lot of parents who need to know what our plans are going to be as well. And I think, while I could wait till mid-August, sure, I could wait till day before school starts, because I know but there are a lot of families who's, like I said, you're looking from a financial standpoint, from a daycare standpoint, who have to make decisions. I know that my wife and I are just waiting to see what happens with our daughter's school. And like I said, so one of the reasons why I brought to the SU is this is an SU level decision. And I think we're, as well as Rick and Liz bring building specific plans, that is like I said, those have more building specific things, but I have no problem bringing it back to the Wells Village, but like I said, I do understand that with each week that we push it back, like I said, I get phone calls, I get emails from a lot of parents out there across the border. I saw the surveys. We had a lot of respondents who sit there and said, we need to know what's going on, give us an idea. And understanding that as of July 22nd, this is what it is, but we also know that moving forward, things could change, and people have to understand that. But I'd rather, put together a plan for us and say this is where we're at, and then if we have to make a change, say I'm sorry we had to make a change, but it's done in the safety of your child. That's it's not because it just we've been holding off. I said I just from the emails and the phone calls and the surveys, I think that, you talk about the anxiety, the stress, the fear that the people are feeling. I think that regardless of what we put out, there are people going to be happy with it. People will be angry about it. People are not going to like it. That's just the reality of this plan. I know that I'm sure that once it's public, whatever it is, there are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to like me. But there's nothing they can do about that. So I understand, Clarence, but I said I brought it to the SU board because I said it was an SU decision for discussion. So if the board feels that we want to wait to discuss some more, then that's obviously I will do whatever the board says. So I will follow your lead on that.
Chris, I have to say, Chris, this is Lynette. I have to say I agree with you. We're not going to make everybody happy, but we already know that. And we got to do what's best for the kids and the staff. I agree with starting with B. You're better off to start safe. And like you said, in 2 weeks, we might be able just to go to A and it's all covered. But if we jump to A, it's going to be worse for the kids if all of a sudden we have to backtrack back to B. It's better that the parents and guardians know ahead of time, this is our plan, this is what we're planning on doing at the start of school, and they can make their plans. Everybody will be in the know, because right now the gossip is all over the place. I agree with just going ahead and let's plan on starting with B, and then we can take it from there when we move back to A and see how that goes.
I think there's a lot of public sentiment too about not wanting school to start. I know Vermont's different, but people are afraid. People are afraid for their friends who are teachers. People are afraid for their own kids. So I think a cautious approach is really important here, and that, in 2 or 3 weeks, we can make the next decision. And then 3 weeks later, we'll make another decision. I just think caution is so much, open the spigot a little at a time.
So I think that, I know this is an SU decision. I think it's irresponsible of us not to make a decision this evening and to make parents, caregivers, guardians just kind of be in this wait and see mode that the VPA likes to live in. I think it's responsible for us to choose a direction, and if we come in August and some things change and we can be into 5, then that's great. It's my understanding that a neighboring high school to the west of us is not doing full-time learning, that they're doing 2 days in school, 3 days out, and I think they've made that public. So this would not make us be unique or the only one that's operating like that. Wednesday we get out at 2 o'clock anyway. Would we be saying that we get out at 11:30, since that actually completes a full day on Wednesday, and then teachers would have time for PD and other work, rather than, we wouldn't be saying we'd have student contact time till 2 o'clock, would we?
No.
Okay.
It's remote learning till 11:30.
Yeah.
Right.
So I totally support that. The only piece I think if we say we're opening at Plan B, I think we do need to have some kind of a time. If we say in 2 weeks, so at least we have a lead time to be able to share with parents if it's going to change. If it's going to change from B to A, the positive is for parents, they're not going to need the childcare where in B, so that might be easy. That would be easier for them, I think, to make the switch rather than going from A to B. And I agree with Meredith. I think parents, family members, people are nervous about going back, even though we are very safe and we haven't seen the numbers here. But I just think it's responsible. We talk about safety, then I think we need to practice what we preach and start on that cautious path. Eric?
Yeah, I kind of agree with the Plan B. I can see why it might make sense to start that way. I'm more in favor of Plan A, honestly. I think kids, and I know it's only a partial day, but I think the kids need to be in school. And I don't think it's that much of a risk any more than it would be, any other day of the week. Then on the flip side, it is easier, for parents to plan to go from not needing daycare to having to figure out daycare. So kind of flip and flop in here, but
I think the other bonus is giving them a day off from the mask. I think that's going to be really, when you talk about the stress portion of it for some of these kids, you think about they've been home. A lot of them haven't even been around, grandparents or other people for whatever reason. So some of them have been very limited in wearing masks. And I would just say that from my daughter's standpoint. When she goes out, but if the choice is to go out and do something or stay home, she's probably gonna option home. And I think a lot of kids are like that. So I think in the beginning, just even if you have a couple of weeks where you're trying to get them into that, and teachers as well. Think about we're sitting here tonight in meetings wearing masks, and pretty soon you feel like, you have that latex glove on and your hands are all soppy and wet, and you feel like you've been in the bathtub too long here. It's that whole kind of, feeling. It's going to be unnatural for them. And younger kids, I think it's going to be even more difficult. So I think it's easier to transition from B to A. I think it makes us, I know it makes us look responsible and cautious, and we're doing what we want to do. We want to get kids in school, and our goal is to get them and keep them in school, not throw them in so fast and then have to pull them back. So.
Well, then I'll just say this, that I know you brought it to as like a board decision, but I'll just say that I'll just go with the superintendent's recommendation, honestly, because you and and the admin team are doing a lot of the work and see the bigger picture, I guess.
So who hasn't spoke?
I just want to say the goal with B was to get us in, and then, like I said, to move. This is not a plan we envisioned for, this is not a long-term plan, Plan B. This is not something we are all year. This is something, and I know, Eric, I appreciate about the risk, but we didn't see this one day as in any way like minimizing risk for kids, but really was done out of, we look back from the operational procedural, because we know that there are going to be issues you're not going to know what it looks like until you get the kids back in the building. And I think if we have an opportunity after 2 days initially to see what's going on, we can quickly then address any sort of safety issues or concerns that might jeopardize the well-being of any sort of, staff member or student. We can quickly make those accommodations without moving back, being reckless, moving back into, say, a step one situation. And I think if we're like I said, if we're conscientious, if we do a nice job, we can move in with the next, I'd say after maybe, week 3 or week 4, right, move into plan A. And it slowly phases back in. I said, but this was not done for, to say, like, some districts say, well, through December. That's not our goal. Our goal is to get this in and then also to see how it works and then quickly make adjustments. And then once we have it tweaked, then we can then, look to bring in plan A. Because like I said, our enrollment numbers work in our favor that we do have the capability of having max capacity in our buildings in each of our learning spaces. But I said we are going to learn a lot about this day one. Regardless of what we do with staff, the mock situations. Day one is with anything is going to really tell us a lot about what we need to address. So.
Jim, we haven't heard from you for a while. So.
Hello. I'm going with the recommendation of the superintendent.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that hasn't spoken to this?
I haven't. This is Mary. I would go along with the plan B, just for a lot of the reasons that were stated. I think as, a person in a human resource situation, during the days, I experience a lot of people experiencing a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. And I think it just gets worse even with their through their children. And I think knowing that there's a day that the school is going to be deep cleaned in between, I think is a comfort. And I think it's going to help a lot of people to feel a little more confident that things will be okay. That's it. So plan B.
So would someone like to make a motion? Do you want it to be consensus? Would you like to give direction to the superintendent? What is the pleasure of the board?
Can I just ask another technical question about the Wednesday, not in school, not in person day, really fast before we do that? So would a student, all the students who would be home on Wednesday or wherever they are to do school, would they need to be, again, I guess it's teacher by teacher, classroom by classroom, but are they expected to be available online that entire time, like 8 a.m. or whatever to 11:30? Or is this, going to be up to the teacher, I guess, to figure out exactly how the student checks in and does what they're supposed to do synchronously?
So Kristen, that is something which we will work with our, I do believe that it's important for us to have an SC-wide expectation of what that looks like as opposed to building based, because I think that's where we had some issues in the past spring, where there was an inconsistency in terms of what that check-in looked like. Students will have to check in. Obviously, you have younger students have their morning meetings, anything along those lines. We envision that there will be a check-in of some sort, but also teachers will provide availability of themselves, for students who need extra help, or catch up a small group. So we'll work through that, and that's something which in our individual board meetings with the next couple weeks, we will have more details of that, but there'll be building specific plans within an SU-wide set of education. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds more appropriate anyway. The only other thing is just to check in with Christine, Cam, to make sure, how you feel about for special ed students and students with special needs. I mean, at least 4 days a week is better than a lot of places I've heard from my friends in all sorts of other states in terms of special ed students and being able to be with their instructors more days, then, you know, at least we have that plan at the beginning. Hopefully that can stay that way, you know, when we actually get into August and September. But I just want to hear how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, I from the whole purpose of the plan, and I understand it. I mean, ideally for a lot of our students on IEPs, having them there every day is probably better, but that's not in all cases. We did, you know, we can work through that. And the expectation is that our special ed services are in line with what gen ed students are getting. So we, you know, meet that consistency. It's going to mean a little more work for special educators because we're going to have to modify IEPs when we shift back and forth. We can do that. We just have to adjust, you know, for that. There's also, we're going to have to do some new planning anyhow, just because of not being able to do some of the group learning that we've done in the past, because you know, we have to have the children in bigger spaces and having those spaces. So we've got some adjustments to make in planning for different scenarios. But
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I can be persuaded. I'm fine with Model B if that's how the board wants to go. So if everybody else feels that way, I think we could probably do by consensus to follow the superintendent's recommendations.
Is it unanimous by consensus?
No, I'm voting no. If there's ever a question to consider.
What did he say? What did he say?
Say that again.
When there's a motion to vote on, I will probably be voting no, depending on the wording of the motion.
All right, so we need a motion. So a motion would be in order. It appears that the consensus of the board is to start with option B and to move to option A.
I'll make a motion that we go with the superintendent's recommendation, option B, with the stipulation that we will relook, and when it's appropriate, we can move to plan A.
Okay. Did everybody hear the motion? Okay, I'm sorry. Second, go ahead.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
So 1 no. Motion passes.
Point of order.
Yes? Do you want to?
Roll call vote.
All right.
Unanimous.
Eric,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Meredith,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Lynette,
Yes.
Lisa's voting yes. Did I miss anyone? Opposed?
Clarence.
Clarence votes no. Thank you. Motion passes. We spoke about grading task force under the assistant superintendent's report. Is there any other business to come before the board before we move into executive session? What is the nature of executive session?
Who's negotiation? Who's want to talk about negotiation?
Okay. So a motion would be in order to move into executive session at 8:31 to discuss negotiations.
I make the motion.
Seconded by Eric. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
We can excuse everyone except the board. Thank you.